There is a quiet mystery that surrounds the beginning of every ancient story, but few open with such a strange and unsettling question as the birth of the Greek gods. Before Zeus ruled the skies, before Athena defended cities, and long before Poseidon stirred the oceans, the world was nothing more than a breath of possibility. Ancient poets described this first moment as chaos, not a violent storm or a swirling vortex, but something far stranger. They imagined a vast, silent expanse with no sky, no earth, no light, and no direction. It was a place without shape, where time had not learned to move forward, and from this stillness, something unexpected happened. A presence emerged, not a deity in the form we recognize, but a force known simply as Gaia, the earth. Gaia did not appear with thunder or flames. She was described as a gentle awakening, the quiet realization of land beneath an endless void. From her, stability began. She offered a foundation the universe had never known, a place where life could eventually take root. Soon after, two more presences drifted out of the emptiness: Tartarus, the deep abyss beneath the world, and Eros, the mysterious force of attraction that would later inspire countless stories of desire, creation, and connection. Though poets debated what Eros truly represented, some saw him as a beautiful youth, others as an invisible spark, everyone agreed on one thing: without him nothing new could ever be born. As time began to stretch and reshape itself, Gaia longed to fill the stillness around her. She brought forth the mountains, the plains, and the rivers, but the universe remained empty of sound and movement. Wanting companionship and balance, Gaia produced the sky, a being named Uranus. He arched above her with star-filled magnificence, and together they formed the first cosmic union. Their bond, however, carried a shadow. From their union came the Titans, the Cyclopes, and the giant beings known as the Hecatoncures. But while Gaia welcomed each new creation, Uranus recoiled. He feared their power, worried that one day his children might surpass him. In a decision that would define the earliest divine conflict, he locked them deep within the earth, trapping them in darkness. The ancient Greeks saw this moment not merely as myth, but as a reflection of something deeply human: the fear of losing control. Many historians today draw parallels between this myth and early societal transitions, comparing it to generational power struggles found in real ancient cultures. Some even argue that the story mirrors older myths from the Near East, where sky gods often clashed with their offspring in battles for authority. While scholars debate these connections, the Greeks themselves believed they were witnessing the first spark of rebellion in a cosmos that had been silent for too long. Gaia, distressed by her children's suffering, sought someone brave enough to challenge the tyranny of Uranus. One Titan stepped forward: Cronus, the youngest and sharpest of the siblings. Gaia armed him with a divine sickle fashioned from unbreakable stone. With it, Cronus confronted his father in an act both shocking and inevitable. The ancient poets wrote about this moment with a mix of awe and discomfort, noting that the world itself trembled as the sky's dominance shattered. Cronus seized control, becoming the new ruler of creation. Yet even as he took the throne, an old pattern was already beginning to form. Power won through fear often invites fear in return, and the seeds of another conflict began to take root. For now, though, the universe entered what the Greeks would later call the Golden Age. Mortals had not yet been created, and the Titans presided over a world of peace, order, and effortless abundance. Crops grew without toil. Seasons flowed gently. Even time seemed to breathe more softly. But beneath this harmonious surface, Cronus carried a secret that weighed on him like a storm waiting to break. For Gaia had whispered a prophecy. Just as he had overthrown his father, one of his own children would one day rise against him. The fear that once consumed Uranus now settled into Cronus' heart, twisting his judgment and setting the stage for a new cycle of turmoil. As the first shadows of that prophecy gathered, the Golden Age began to crack, revealing what would become one of the most defining legends in Greek mythology. And although peace still covered the land, a quiet tension warned that everything was about to change. Cronus tried to cling to the peace of his new era, but the prophecy gnawed at him like an unseen beast in the dark. Every time a child was born to him in Rhea, he felt the future tightening around his throat. And so, driven by fear far stronger than any love, he performed an act that echoed with dread across the cosmos. One by one, as each child drew their first breath, Cronus swallowed them whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon all vanished into the depths of his stomach, condemned to a stillness as suffocating as the darkness their father once endured. Ancient poets described their prison as a silent chamber where time itself refused to move, and although the children lived, they existed in a state of suspended despair. Rhea, heartbroken and helpless, watched her family unravel under Cronus' cruelty. She was a Titaness with deep ties to the earth, and her instincts to nurture were stronger than any fear. Yet she knew that challenging Cronus directly would lead to ruin. Seeking comfort, she traveled to Gaia, her mother, who listened with the patience of stone worn by centuries. Gaia offered a plan, one that would require both courage and deception. When Rhea's next child was due, she fled to the island of Crete, a place that would become sacred for generations to come. There, in a hidden cave surrounded by mountains and wild forests, she gave birth to Zeus. This moment was one of the most debated in ancient storytelling. Different regions in Greece insisted they knew the true birthplace of the sky's future ruler. Some said the infant Zeus was hidden in Mount Dicte, others swore it was Mount Ida. Even the caretakers of Zeus vary depending on the tale. Some legends say that nymphs raised him, others claim a goat named Amalthea nourished him with her milk. A few rare versions even mention a mysterious guardian named Melissa who fed him honey, giving him the strength of eternal sweetness. No matter which version one chooses, one detail remains consistent. The infant's cries were masked by the thunderous clashing of shields and spears by the Curetes, young warriors sworn to protect him. Back in the Titan King's Hall, Rhea enacted Gaia's plan. She wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and presented it to Cronus as though it were her newborn son. Without hesitation, Cronus swallowed the bundle, too afraid to question, too consumed by the shadow of prophecy to sense deception. Satisfied that his rule remained secure, he continued his reign, unaware that the future he dreaded was growing stronger each day in the secrecy of Crete. As Zeus matured, nurtured by divine caretakers and shaped by the wildness of mountains, he developed a spirit unlike any of his siblings. He learned the ways of the land, the secrets of storms, and the courage of beings who knew struggle intimately. Some legends depict him as a spirited youth who played with sacred animals and danced along cliff edges. Others describe him as quiet, observant, and deeply aware of his destiny. Regardless of interpretation, one truth is shared. Zeus did not grow up in ease. He grew up in preparation. When the time came, Zeus returned to face the father who had erased his siblings from the world. But defeating Cronus was not a simple task. To challenge a Titan, Zeus needed wisdom, allies, and a strategy that would break the cycle of fear once and for all. In many stories, the goddess Metis, known for her unmatched cleverness, played a crucial role. She concocted a potion capable of forcing Cronus to release what he had consumed. Disguised in cunning, Zeus approached Cronus and gave him the mixture without raising suspicion. Moments later, Cronus trembled, convulsed, and finally regurgitated his children in dramatic bursts, each emerging fully grown and ready to join the rebellion. The world trembled as the family reunited. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, and Hestia stood together for the first time, united not only by blood but by shared suffering. The loyalty forged in that moment became the foundation of what would one day be the Olympian order. Yet their liberation did not immediately lead to victory. Cronus rallied the Titans, who still supported him, and the universe braced for a conflict that would shake the very fabric of existence. This war, known as the Titanomachy, was not just a clash of power. It marked the end of one cosmic era and the beginning of another. For 10 years, lightning split mountains, oceans roared, and the earth shook beneath the weight of divine fury. Not all Titans chose sides easily. Some remained neutral, while others, like Prometheus and Epimetheus, secretly guided Zeus' forces, drawn by a belief that the younger gods represented a new, more balanced future. Even among ancient storytellers, the moral lines were never entirely clear. Some described Cronus as a tyrant brought down by justice. Others painted him as a tragic figure haunted by destiny he could not escape. The battle's turning point came when Zeus freed the Cyclopes and Hecatontures from their ancient imprisonment. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged powerful weapons for the young gods, lightning bolts for Zeus, a mighty trident for Poseidon, and a helm of invisibility for Hades. Armed with these gifts, the Olympians surged with renewed strength, and the tides of war shifted. As the final clash approached, the air itself grew heavy with anticipation. The old order had cracked. The new one waited breathlessly beneath the surface, ready to rise. The final stretch of the Titanomachy unfolded like a storm that refused to pass. Mountains cracked, the oceans churned with relentless fury, and even the stars seemed to shudder as the old and new orders collided. Zeus, fueled by the weapons gifted by the Cyclopes, unleashed bolts of lightning that tore through the sky with blinding brilliance. Poseidon shook the seas with the force of his trident, sending waves crashing against the shores of creation. Hades, with his helm of invisibility, moved silently across the battlefield like a shadow made of intent, striking from places no Titan could anticipate. The Hecatoncheires hurled massive boulders with their 100 arms, turning the tide into an unstoppable avalanche of power. The Titans fought fiercely. Atlas held the line with unmatched resolve, his strength so immense that even Zeus hesitated before approaching. Other Titans, like Hyperion and Zeus, summoned forces of celestial fire and deep knowledge, trying to reclaim control. Yet despite their raw might, something had shifted. This new generation of gods fought not only with strength but with a sense of destiny sharpened by years of suffering. They knew the world could not return to the rule of fear, and that awareness fueled their determination. When the last clash finally erupted on the shadowed slopes of Mount Othrys, the ground beneath them echoed with a thunder that felt like the heartbeat of the world preparing for renewal. The Olympians surged forward. One by one the Titans fell or fled, overwhelmed by the combined ferocity and unity of their opponents. In the end, Cronus himself confronted Zeus. Their battle was described by ancient storytellers as a meeting of storm and stone, the sky roaring against the earth in a struggle neither wished to prolong, but both were destined to fight. Zeus did not defeat his father with ease. He won because the world itself leaned toward change. With the war's end, Zeus cast the defeated Titans into the deep gloom of Tartarus. There the Hecatoncheires became their wardens, guarding them with tireless vigilance. Only a few Titans were spared, those who had chosen neutrality or aided the Olympians. Prometheus and Epimetheus were among them, their loyalty rewarded with freedom and trust. The universe, once again, exhaled. A new order had risen, and the reign of the Olympians began. To establish harmony, Zeus gathered his brothers. Together, they divided the cosmos in a way that reflected balance rather than dominance. Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon took the seas, and Hades received the underworld, a realm not of evil but of responsibility and solitude. Many modern retellings paint Hades as a sinister ruler, yet ancient Greeks did not see him as malicious. He was steady, fair, and unwavering in duty, a guardian of boundaries rather than a tyrant of shadows. The division of power among the three brothers marked a turning point in mythological history and shaped the spiritual worldview of generations. With the cosmic order secured, the Olympians took their place atop Mount Olympus, a summit imagined as both a physical mountain and a celestial realm. The ancients believed that the clouds themselves opened like curtains to reveal its shining halls, where time moved gently and feasts lasted forever. Yet for all the glory surrounding Olympus, the new gods carried the echoes of their past. They had survived betrayal, war, and fear, and while they now stood as guardians of the world, none were free of flaws or desires. Zeus, in particular, struggled to balance his immense power with the responsibility of guiding creation. Stories describe him as noble, wise, and protective, yet also impulsive and often swayed by emotion. His thunderbolts were symbols of justice, but they also revealed moments of personal frustration. These contradictions made him both awe-inspiring and deeply human in the eyes of ancient worshippers. Across different regions of Greece, temples portrayed different sides of him, some as a serene fatherly figure, others as a mighty warrior whose storms warned mortals to respect divine boundaries. Hera, now queen of Olympus, entered her role with a quiet strength forged in suffering. Her marriage to Zeus, often portrayed in simplified or exaggerated ways today, was viewed by ancient Greeks as a bond representing cosmic order. Hera was not merely a wife. She was a force who upheld vows, structure, and moral balance. Worshippers saw her as a protector of marriage, childbirth, and dignity, yet her stories frequently reveal a fierce defender of loyalty, reacting strongly when Zeus's actions threatened the harmony she worked to preserve. In many regions, Hera was honored independently of Zeus, reflecting her ancient roots as a powerful goddess long before the Olympian order took shape. The early days of Olympus were filled with new challenges as the gods learned to rule over a world that was still young and uncertain. Mortals had yet to populate the earth in the way later myths describe. The gods observed the rivers, mountains, and winds, shaping them with curiosity and purpose. Each deity brought a different influence. Athena crafted strategies and ideas. Apollo cultivated harmony and prophecy. Demeter guided the hidden rhythms of nature, and Artemis patrolled the forests with quiet precision. But even as the new age settled, the past lingered like a whisper beneath the surface. The Titans had fallen, but the memory of their rule remained, shaping the choices and fears of the younger gods. And among those memories, one truth stood above all: power, once gained, must be nurtured with wisdom or risk repeating the cycle of destruction that had nearly consumed the cosmos. As peace settled gradually over the newly formed Olympus, the world below began to shift in ways the gods had not yet fully understood. The Titans had once ruled with distant authority, rarely interacting with the land in personal ways. The Olympians, however, were different. They felt curiosity toward the earth, interest in its landscapes, and a growing fascination with the beings who would soon inhabit it. Zeus recognized that this new order required more than victory. It needed structure, guidance, and a sense of purpose. His rule began not with thunder, but with attention to the rhythms of the world he now governed. One of the first divine relationships shaped during this era was the delicate balance among Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Their pact to divide the cosmos had created stability, but it also formed subtle boundaries that each learned to respect. Poseidon, ruler of the seas, embraced his domain with powerful intensity. He could stir oceans into whirlpools, or calm them into shimmering glass with a single decision. Sailors prayed to him before voyages, knowing his mood could decide whether they reached port or vanished beneath the waves. Some ancient coastal towns believed that Poseidon walked among them in disguise, testing their respect and rewarding loyalty with gentle tides. Hades, meanwhile, ruled a realm misunderstood by many later storytellers. The underworld was not a pit of torment, but a solemn space where souls found their destinies. It was quiet, orderly, and divided into regions that reflected different paths a soul could follow. Hades himself was a sober, reserved god, known for fairness rather than wrath. The Greeks rarely depicted him as cruel. Instead, they respected his role as essential. Life needed an end, and endings needed a guardian. Though mortals feared entering his kingdom, they did not despise him. He was the inevitable keeper of final truths, and his rule remained stable because he did not seek power beyond what was his. Despite the harmony among the brothers, Zeus grew increasingly conscious of the weight of leadership. The sky heard every wish, every complaint, and every blessing from below. As the god who could sense shifts in fate, he began shaping the foundations of law, justice, and balance. Yet his personality, vibrant and unpredictable, often complicated his attempts to embody perfect authority. Even in the early myths, Zeus struggled to reconcile his lofty ideals with his own impulses. His decisions were powerful, but sometimes steeped in emotion or instinct rather than cool judgment. Hera, observing these tendencies, became both a counterpart and a stabilizing force. While many stories focus on the conflicts between Zeus and Hera, the ancient Greeks understood their relationship as symbolic of two opposing yet complementary forces. Zeus represented the wildness of storms and sudden decisions. Hera embodied endurance, structure, and a protective nature that extended not only to marriage but to the order of society itself. In some early regions, especially Argos and Samos, Hera was worshipped with a reverence that even overshadowed Zeus. Her temples were older, her rituals deeper, hinting that she may have originated as an independent earth or sky goddess long before the Olympians came to prominence. The contrast between Zeus and Hera formed the emotional backbone of many stories that mortals later told. Around firelit gatherings, their union was not simple or peaceful. It was dynamic, reflecting the tension between freedom and responsibility. When Zeus acted impulsively, Hera often worked to correct or counterbalance his choices, especially when those choices involved mortals or demigods born of his wandering affections. Her reactions, often portrayed as jealousy in modern retellings, were in the ancient world seen as actions of a goddess defending cosmic harmony. As Olympus took shape, other deities rose to prominence. Athena, born from Zeus in one of the strangest myths ever recorded, emerged as a beacon of intelligence and strategy. According to tradition, Zeus feared another prophecy that a child born to the goddess Metis would surpass its parents. To avoid this threat, he swallowed Metis whole, believing he could contain her power. But Metis began crafting within him, her cleverness undimmed. One day Zeus felt a splitting pain in his skull, so powerful that he called on Hephaestus to strike it open. From this wound, Athena emerged, fully grown and clad in shining armor, her eyes blazing with clarity. Athena quickly became one of the most beloved gods in the Greek world. She represented reason, warfare guided by logic, and the crafts that sustained cities. Many ancient scholars believed that Athena was a transformed version of an older pre-Hellenic goddess of wisdom, absorbed into the Olympian structure as Greek civilization evolved. Her connection to Athens, the city named in her honor, became a symbol of the intellectual and cultural achievements of the classical world. Meanwhile, Apollo and Artemis emerged as divine twins whose nature balanced day and night. Born on the island of Delos, Toledo, they became protectors of purity, music, prophecy, and the wilderness. Apollo's presence shone with an almost blinding brilliance. As the god of light, healing, and arts. He brought inspiration to poets and order to the natural world. His oracles, especially the one at Delphi, became centers of spiritual authority, where even kings would kneel to hear cryptic guidance. Artemis, on the other hand, embodied the freedom of forests and the untamed spirit of wild creatures. She guarded the young and punished disrespect with swift decisiveness. Several myths described mortals who underestimated her restraint, only to learn how fiercely she defended the natural world. The story of Actaeon, a hunter transformed into a stag after disturbing her privacy, reflected the sacredness she commanded. As these divine personalities developed, Olympus began to resemble a vibrant, complex society rather than a distant pantheon. The gods argued, celebrated, plotted, and mourned much like humans do, which is perhaps why the Greeks felt such a deep connection to them. Their flaws made them relatable, their power made them more inspiring, and as mortals began to appear in the world below, the stories that intertwined gods and humans became the heart of Greek mythology, setting the stage for adventures, tragedies, and revelations that still echo through time. As the Olympian family grew, their influence spread into every corner of the world, shaping landscapes, destinies, and the hearts of the mortals who walked the earth. Each deity carried within them a unique resonance, a presence that could sway the balance of nature or alter the course of a single human life. Among these gods, few were as complex and deeply misunderstood as Aphrodite. Her origin was shrouded in mystery, and depending on the tradition, she was either born from the sea foam that rose when the remnants of Uranus touched the waters, or she emerged as the daughter of Zeus and Dione. These dual lineages reflected two entirely different aspects of her nature: the timeless, cosmic force of desire and the more personal, relational goddess worshipped in temples across the Greek world. Aphrodite held sway over beauty, love, and longing, but her influence extended far beyond romance. To the ancient Greeks, she embodied the power of attraction itself, a force capable of uniting or destroying. Myths portrayed her as enchanting yet tempestuous, compassionate yet vengeful. Her relationships with gods and mortals often led to conflict, not because she enjoyed chaos, but because desire is unpredictable and rarely follows logic. Even her marriage to Hephaestus, the divine craftsman, felt symbolic of a deeper truth. Beauty does not always align with expectation. Their union was stable in structure but turbulent in emotion, marked by her attraction to Ares, the god of war. Ares, fiery and impulsive, was the embodiment of raw conflict. He represented the brutality and confusion of battle, the noise, the fear, the unpredictable violence. Many ancient Greeks viewed him with caution, respecting his presence, but rarely admiring him. In contrast, Athena represented a completely different vision of warfare, strategic, disciplined, and governed by intellect. The contrast between Ares and Athena reflected the tension within Greek society itself, divided between chaotic passion and thoughtful order. Stories of their rivalry revealed the ancient belief that victory belonged not to sheer strength but to well-applied wisdom. Hephaestus, though often overlooked in modern retellings, held an essential place among the gods. Cast out of Olympus at birth in some versions of the myth or thrown out later after defending Hera in others, Hephaestus grew up far from divine luxury. His legs were injured, his movements imperfect, yet his spirit remained unbroken. Through perseverance and brilliance, he forged masterpieces that shaped the very identity of Olympus. Weapons, palaces, thrones, automatons, his craftsmanship surpassed anything mortals or immortals had ever seen. Some scholars believe the myth of Hephaestus reflects the reverence ancient cultures had for metal workers, who were often considered mystical figures capable of taming fire and shaping raw elements into divine creations. Among the Olympians, one figure stood apart: Dionysus, the god who arrived late, yet made an impact as profound as thunder. Dionysus was the deity of wine, ecstasy, and liberation, a force that blurred the boundaries between the civilized and the primal. His birth story was one of the strangest in all mythology. Zeus, after losing his lover Semele to a tragic encounter with divine truth, rescued the unborn child, and stitched him into his own thigh until the baby was ready to be born. This unusual beginning set the tone for Dionysus, life a blend of sorrow, joy, madness, and revelation. Dionysus traveled widely, spreading his rituals across regions and challenging the rigid structures that held society in place. His worshippers believed he offered liberation from suffering, release from burdens, and a taste of divine freedom. Yet his presence could also be dangerous. Those who resisted him, mocked him, or denied his divinity often met dramatic fates. The story of King Pentheus, torn apart after spying on the god's sacred rites, served as a warning about the consequences of rejecting the unknown. Many historians interpret Dionysus as a reflection of ancient rituals tied to seasonal cycles, harvests, and communal celebration. Others see him as emerging of Greek traditions with influences from the Near East, hinting at how cultures interwove to create new spiritual identities. Another goddess whose story carried deep emotional weight was Demeter, the guardian of the earth's fertility. Her myth centered on the bond with her daughter Persephone, a connection so potent that it reshaped the rhythm of the seasons. When Hades, captivated by Persephone's beauty, carried her to the underworld, Demeter was consumed by grief. Her sorrow dried rivers, withered crops, and plunged the world into a barren chill. The ancient Greeks interpreted the landscape itself as participating in Demeter's mourning. Eventually Zeus intervened, but the negotiation was imperfect. Persephone would spend part of the year with her mother, bringing spring and summer, and part with Hades, ushering autumn and winter. This cycle became one of the most poetic and emotionally resonant narratives of Greek mythology. The mysteries of Eleusis grew around this story, drawing thousands seeking spiritual insight and comfort. These rites, kept secret for centuries, promised hope in the face of death and a deeper understanding of life's cycles. Scholars today still debate the ritual's details, as initiates were sworn to silence. Some believe the ceremonies involved symbolic reenactments of Persephone's return. Others think psychoactive substances played a role, guiding participants toward profound inner visions. Whatever the truth, the mysteries reflect the spiritual depth of Demeter Resmith and her influence over both nature and human emotion. As the stories of these gods evolved, they revealed a tapestry of relationships, conflicts, and revelations that mirrored human experience. The Olympians were not distant, flawless entities. They were reflections of the world's beauty and its flaws. Their stories served as lessons, warnings, hopes, and explanations for the mysteries of existence. And as mortals looked to the sky or gathered around temple fires, they found comfort in imagining the gods not as unreachable rulers, but as beings who understood the chaos, longing, and wonder that shaped human life. As the Olympian world matured, the boundaries between divine and mortal life grew more intricate. The gods often watched humanity with fascination, curiosity, and, at times, concern. Mortals were fragile, brief sparks of existence compared to the glowing permanence of Olympus. Yet they carried something the gods valued: passion, unpredictability, and a hunger to understand forces far beyond their grasp. These qualities led to the rise of heroes, individuals whose lives wove together the destinies of gods and humans in ways that shaped entire eras. One of the most widely celebrated heroes was Heracles, whose strength and endurance became legendary, but his story was intertwined with divine conflict from the very beginning. Born from Zeus and the mortal woman Alcmene, Heracles represented the merging of worlds. Hera, furious at Zeus's betrayal, directed her anger toward the child rather than her husband. In many myths, she sent serpents to his cradle, only to watch the infant Heracles strangle them with ease. The trials that followed his 12 labors became symbols of human resilience, shaped by divine interference. Some scholars believe these labors represented ancient rituals or challenges faced by warriors and kings. Others think they symbolized the hero's journey through madness, redemption, and transformation. Perseus, another child touched by divine fate, embarked on his journey with a combination of bravery and divine support. His mission to slay Medusa, the only mortal Gorgon, required more than courage. It required tools forged by gods. Athena and Hermes provided him with guidance, weapons, and protection, revealing how deeply the Olympians inserted themselves into the destinies of mortals they favored. Medusa's myth itself carried layers of complexity. Some ancient accounts portrayed her as a monster from birth, while later interpretations described her as a once beautiful maiden wronged by divine cruelty. The fact that Perseus' victory became a symbol of triumph over darkness reflected the shifting nature of storytelling, where older myths evolved to match the values of different eras. Then there was Theseus, the hero of Athens, whose fame came not only from defeating the Minotaur but from reshaping the identity of an entire city. Born of a complicated lineage involving both a mortal king and Poseidon, Theseus embodied the idea that heroes belonged to two worlds at once. His journey into the labyrinth of Crete required not only strength but cunning. Ariadne's thread, a simple object charged with cleverness, became one of the most enduring symbols of guidance, showing that even in darkness, a steady path could lead to salvation. Historians have long debated whether the Minotaur myth reflected older cultural tensions between Athens and Crete, or whether it symbolized the triumph of rational civilization over ancient, chaotic forces. Achilles, however, carried a different kind of weight. His story was woven with the inevitability of fate, a theme that resonated deeply with ancient Greek audiences. Born to the sea nymph Thetis and the mortal Peleus, Achilles was destined for greatness but not for longevity. His near invulnerability, gifted when Thetis dipped him in the river Styx, became a metaphor for human limitation. No matter how powerful one becomes, there will always be one vulnerable point in Achilles' heel that defines the fragility of life. The stories surrounding Achilles reveal a young warrior driven by pride, sorrow, and the search for meaning in a world where fate could not be altered. His conflict with Agamemnon, his grief over Patroclus, and his eventual downfall all illustrate the emotional complexity that defined Greek mythology. Even heroes less frequently discussed carried powerful tales. Bellerophon, for example, rose to fame through his bond with Pegasus and his victory over the monstrous Chimera. But his story ended in tragedy when pride led him to attempt flight to Olympus itself. The gods, offended by his hubris, cast him down, turning a celebrated warrior into a symbol of the dangers of ambition untempered by humility. Likewise, Orpheus, revered for his divine music, journeyed into the underworld to retrieve his beloved Eurydice. His failure to trust the command given to him, "Do not look back," reflected the human struggle between faith and fear. These stories highlighted the delicate balance between divine favor and personal choice. The relationships between heroes and gods often revealed the hidden personalities of the Olympians. Zeus acted as protector to some, yet distanced himself from others. Hera punished those who reminded her of betrayal but also rewarded loyalty and devotion. Athena guided heroes with calm precision, never acting out of impulse but always out of calculated wisdom. Poseidon's involvement with heroes was unpredictable. He could be generous or fiercely vengeful, depending on how mortals honored him. The gods were not moral examples, they were forces, capable of nurturing or destroying based on complex emotions and ancient rules. One of the most intriguing aspects of these myths is how they reflect the concerns of the societies that told them. War, famine, leadership, justice, betrayal. Each theme carried echoes of real historical struggles faced by ancient Greek communities. The myths were not merely stories but lenses through which people understood their world. Even the concept of divine punishment was not viewed as cruelty but as the natural consequence of disrupting cosmic harmony. Hubris, the excessive pride that led mortals to challenge gods, was considered the greatest danger of all. It served as a reminder that balance was sacred and that even the mighty could fall if they forgot their place in the universe. Despite the tragic endings many heroes faced, their stories inspired hope. Their courage showed that humans, though fragile, could achieve greatness through perseverance, intelligence, and resilience. Their flaws made them relatable. Their victories made them symbols of possibility. Through these tales, the Greeks preserved not only their mythology but their understanding of the human spirit. As the age of heroes unfolded, the world grew more complex. Mortals built cities, temples, and traditions that began shaping their own destinies. The gods watched as humanity evolved, sometimes stepping in, sometimes stepping aside. And even though the line between divine and mortal remained firm, the stories that connected them became the foundation of an entire culture, a culture that still whispers through the centuries, inviting listeners to explore the echoes of a world shaped by God's heroes and the delicate threads of fate. As mortal societies expanded and the Olympian gods established their influence, a quieter tension began to stir beneath the surface of myth. Though the gods ruled from Olympus, their power did not exist in a vacuum. Ancient Greece was not a single unified kingdom but a landscape of independent city-states, each with its own customs, politics, and spiritual priorities. As a result, the gods themselves took on different personalities depending on where they were worshipped. This fluidity made them feel both universal and personal, shaping their legends into living reflections of the people who honored them. In Sparta, for example, Artemis was not the gentle protector of animals commonly known in Athenian myths. Instead, she appeared as a fierce guardian of discipline and warrior training. Her rituals involved rites of endurance, reflecting the harsh values of Spartan society. In contrast, Athens saw her as a nurturing guide to young women, a protector of innocence who embodied the balance between nature and civility. These contrasting interpretations show how one goddess could encompass multifaceted roles, adapting to the needs of each community. Apollo, too, carried dual identities depending on the region. In Delphi, he was the god of prophecy, speaking through the enigmatic words of the Pythia whose trance-like utterances shaped political decisions across the Mediterranean. Yet in other places, Apollo was seen primarily as a healer, invoked during plagues or crises of health. His epithets Phoebus, Loxias, Pionich revealed a different aspect of his being. Scholars today believe this multiplicity stemmed from the merging of older regional deities as Greek culture evolved. A blending of traditions that created a complex, layered god rather than a single fixed figure. Meanwhile, the cult of Artemis and Apollo's mother, Leto, remained deeply important on islands like Delos. Here, rituals celebrated birth, renewal, and family lineage. The Greeks believed the floating island had anchored itself for her labor, an act of compassion from Gaia. This myth emphasized the idea that even the earth recognized divine suffering, illustrating a universe that responded emotionally to the experiences of gods and mortals alike. Athena, despite her widespread admiration, also carried regional variations. In Athens, she represented wisdom, strategy, and civic order, a goddess whose presence guided the city toward intellectual and artistic flourishing. But in other regions, she appeared as a warrior deity with far more ferocity, reflecting local histories of conflict. Her temple in Sparta honored her as a goddess of martial skill, reinforcing her ability to shift from scholar to warrior as needed. This adaptability made Athens claim her not only as patron but as a symbol of its identity and embodiment of reason tempered by resilience. Zeus himself appeared in countless forms. At Dodona, worshippers believed he spoke through the rustling leaves of a sacred oak, offering guidance in the simplest of natural signs. At Olympia, he was the god of honor and competition, inspiring athletes to push the boundaries of human excellence. In Crete, some traditions depicted him as a dying androborn god linked to agricultural cycles. Though this version never became mainstream, it suggests an ancient and possibly pre-Olympian layer to his identity. Even the epithets of Zeus, rainbringer, cloud-gatherer, friend to strangers, captured the many ways people interpreted his presence. Hera, too, held strong independent worship across different regions. In Argos, she was honored as the supreme goddess, more powerful and ancient than Zeus in some traditions. Her temple there, the Heraion, was one of the oldest and most revered sanctuaries in the Greek world. These regional interpretations reveal that Hera was not merely a reactive figure concerned with Zeus's wandering affections. She represented sovereignty, motherhood, and the sacred nature of family structures. The modern tendency to reduce her to jealousy obscures the depth of her ancient role. Poseidon's personality also shifted depending on where he was revered. In landlocked areas, he carried less influence, but in coastal cities and island communities, he was both feared and deeply respected. Mariners offered sacrifices before voyages, hoping he would calm the seas. Earthquakes, believed to be caused by his trident striking the ground, reminded mortals of his power even far from the shore. In some parts of Greece, Poseidon was worshipped as the creator of horses, a surprising detail that connected him to land rather than sea. This association may have originated from older Indo-European myths about sky or storm gods linked to steeds. Hades, though rarely worshipped directly, held a subtle but significant presence in myths and rituals. The Greeks avoided calling him by name out of respect, using titles like the Unseen One. While no grand temples were dedicated to him, sanctuaries and caves were believed to be entrances to his realm. His absence from everyday worship reflected not disdain, but reverence for boundaries that mortals felt should not be crossed lightly. Death was inevitable, and Hades was the dignified keeper of that truth. Demeter and Persephone, on the other hand, inspired some of the most emotionally charged rituals in Greek religion. Their influence extended across the countryside, where farmers depended on the success of crops and the turning of seasons. The Eleusinian mysteries, held in honor of their bond, created a spiritual connection that transcended social class. Rich or poor, citizen or foreigner, anyone initiated into the mysteries was said to gain a deeper understanding of life and death. Though the details remain obscured by secrecy, ancient writers describe the experience as transformative, offering a vision of hope beyond earthly struggles. Dionysus, with his unpredictable nature, became a symbol of liberation from societal constraints. His followers believed he offered temporary freedom from the burdens of identity and responsibility. Through wine, music, and ecstatic ritual, worshippers sought to dissolve the boundaries between self and divine. But this freedom carried risks. Cities that resisted Dionysus often faced myths of devastating consequences, symbolizing the dangers of suppressing emotional or spiritual expression. Some historians view Dionysus as representing the psychological need for release, a counterbalance to the rational influence of gods like Apollo. As each region shaped its own connection with the gods, the myths continued to evolve. They were never static. They grew and shifted with the people who told them. The Olympians became mirrors of humanity's diversity, reflecting the hopes, fears, and values of countless communities. And through this ever-changing tapestry, the gods remained vivid, alive not only in the heavens, but in the stories whispered around fires, the rituals performed under moonlit skies, and the quiet prayers carried on the wind. As the myths deepened and spread across generations, the relationships among the gods revealed layers of emotion, rivalry, and mythology that shaped both heaven and earth. Among these tales, few relationships were more complex or more symbolic than the one between Apollo and Artemis. Although twins, they embodied nearly opposing forces: light and shadow, civilization and wilderness, prophecy and instinct. Their dynamic illustrated the delicate balance the Greeks believed governed the natural world. Apollo, radiant and composed, represented order and clarity. Artemis, fierce and free, embodied the wild mysteries of the untouched earth. Their birth on the island of Delos was seen as a sacred moment when divine resilience conquered hardship. Leto, fleeing Hera's relentless persecution, found refuge only when Delos agreed to anchor itself long enough for her to give birth. The island, once described as a wandering piece of land, became a holy site where pilgrims traveled for centuries. The myth symbolized the idea that even in chaos, stability could emerge through perseverance. Many ancient festivals honored this moment, celebrating the arrival of two deities whose influence stretched from mountaintops to city temples. Apollo's life was filled with dualities. He could heal with his touch or spread plagues with a single arrow. He inspired poets and guided kings, yet punished arrogance with unforgiving precision. His oracle at Delphi became the spiritual center of the Greek world, drawing visitors from far-off lands. The Pythia's cryptic messages shaped wars, political shifts, and the foundations of entire cities. Scholars today believe the rituals at Delphi mixed spiritual practice with natural geological phenomena. The intoxicating fumes from fissures beneath the temple may have contributed to the trance-like states described by ancient writers. Whether divine or natural, the oracle's influence was undeniable. Artemis, on the other hand, lived at the edges of civilization. She valued independence and protected the vulnerable women in childbirth, young animals and children crossing into adulthood. Yet her protection carried strict boundaries. Those who violated her rules faced consequences as severe as any decree from Zeus. Actaeon, who stumbled upon her bathing, was transformed into a stag and devoured by his own hunting dogs. The story was not meant as cruelty but as a warning. The sacredness of privacy and purity must be respected. Artemis myths often reflected ancient societal values around modesty, wilderness, and the delicate balance between nature and human intrusion. Hephaestus also played a significant but often understated role in the divine ecosystem. While many gods embodied lofty ideals, Hephaestus represented dedication through craft. His forge burned in the heart of volcanoes, lighting the night sky with the glow of molten metal. Through his skill, he created weapons of unimaginable power, thrones that moved on their own, and even living statues capable of speech. Some myths described him building automatons crafted from gold, which served as attendants in his workshop. These stories may have originated from early fascination with mechanical devices, reflecting the technological curiosity of ancient engineers. Yet the god of the forge carried emotional complexity. He was born with physical imperfections, leading Hera in some versions to cast him from Olympus in shame. In others he was thrown because he supported Hera against Zeus. Despite these painful origins, Hephaestus returned to Olympus with dignity, using his brilliance to secure respect. His marriage to Aphrodite, though troubled, represented the union of artifice and beauty to forces that shaped the Greek worldview. Aphrodite herself remained one of the most unpredictable figures on Olympus. While associated with love and allure, she wielded influence that could ignite wars or inspire peace. Her involvement in the judgment of Paris, where she promised the Trojan prince, the most beautiful woman in the world, set the stage for the Trojan War. But the conflict was not portrayed simply as a fault. It reflected the complexities of desire, honor, and fate. To the Greeks, love could be both a blessing and a catalyst for turmoil, and Aphrodite embodied that duality with striking clarity. Ares, her frequent companion, brought his own complications. Though feared as the embodiment of war's brutality, he was also a figure of passion and competitive instinct. The Greeks held an ambivalent view of him. Some regions worshipped him fervently, while others emphasized the superiority of Athena's strategic approach to conflict. Their differing perspectives reflect a philosophical divide within ancient Greek culture: should challenges be met with force or with calculated thought? This question echoed through countless myths and shaped the identities of city-states like Sparta and Athens. Even Hermes, known for his speed, wit, and boundless cleverness, played a crucial role in holding the pantheon together. As messenger of the gods, guide of souls, and patron of travelers, merchants, and thieves, Hermes bridged gaps between worlds. His stories were filled with playful mischief, stealing Apollo's cattle as an infant, inventing the lyre, and negotiating peace when conflicts erupted. His adaptability made him one of the most beloved figures in myths, a god who embodied both the unpredictable nature of life and the charm needed to navigate it. Each deity's story added threads to the intricate tapestry of Greek mythology. These tales were more than entertainment. They were mirrors, reflecting how the Greeks understood morality, emotion, and the forces that shaped existence. The gods were flawed yet powerful, distant yet intimately connected to human life. Through festivals, rituals, and storytelling, mortals maintained a dialogue with the divine, seeking meaning in a world full of uncertainty. Despite the gods' immense power, the myths often suggested that they, too, were bound by fate, by ancient laws older than Zeus himself. This belief revealed a profound idea at the heart of Greek thought. Even gods must respect the order of the universe. They were not omnipotent rulers but part of a larger cosmic structure that guided all things. As this understanding took shape, stories continued to intertwine the worlds of gods and mortals, laying the foundation for legends that would endure long after temples crumbled and empires fell. These myths formed a spiritual language, one that whispered across centuries, offering comfort, guidance, and profound wonder to those who listened. As the Olympians shaped the heavens and watched over the mortal world, the underworld, quiet, distant, and wrapped in solemn mystery, became a realm that held even deeper significance. Hades, often overshadowed by his more dramatic brothers, ruled this domain with a calm discipline that made him one of the most misunderstood figures in mythology. Unlike the violent rulers of other ancient underworlds, Hades was not a tyrant. He was a steward, a guardian of boundaries that even gods respected. Mortals feared his realm because it represented the unavoidable truth of existence. Yet they also found comfort in knowing it was governed by order rather than chaos. The story that most clearly revealed the depth of Hades' character was the myth of Persephone. Her abduction, or descent, depending on the version told, was one of the most emotionally charged tales in Greek mythology. Some traditions emphasized Hades' quiet longing, describing him as a lonely ruler who sought companionship in a realm devoid of joy. Others framed the moment as a breach of trust, a sudden act that shattered Demeter's world. Yet every version led to the same truth. Persephone's journey bridged the distance between life and death, creating a cycle that defined the seasons themselves. Demeter's anguish at her daughter's disappearance was so profound that it transformed the world. Fields turned barren, rivers shrank, and life withered as she wandered the earth searching for answers. Her sorrow revealed the power of divine emotion, how the grief of a goddess could shape nature itself. When Persephone finally returned, the earth responded with an explosion of growth, a relief expressed through springtime's vivid renewal. But because Persephone had eaten the pomegranate seeds in the underworld, she was bound to return for part of the year. This bittersweet rhythm offered the Greeks a poetic explanation for the cycle of seasons, blending natural observation with spiritual symbolism. The emotional impact of this myth extended beyond storytelling. The Eleusinian mysteries, among the most sacred and secretive rites in the ancient world, were built around Demeter and Persephone's bond. Initiates, who swore strict vows of silence, were said to emerge from the ceremonies transformed, carrying a newfound hope about life, death, and the possibility of something beyond. Even today, historians cannot fully reconstruct what happened during these rites. Some believe the rituals involve symbolic reenactments, torches in the night, and sacred objects. Others suggest the use of natural psychoactive substances that may have enhanced visions and spiritual insight. Whatever the truth, it is clear these rituals offered a powerful sense of meaning, proof that mythology was not merely entertainment, but a living spiritual force. While Demeter and Hades shaped the unseen aspects of existence, other gods influenced the visible world through their interactions with mortals. Prometheus, though technically a titan, played an essential role in shaping humanity's destiny. His name, meaning forethought, reflected his deep compassion and wisdom. In the myth of creation, he formed humans from clay and gifted them fire, a gift the gods had withheld. This act, viewed as defiance by Zeus, ignited a conflict that led to Prometheus' torment. Bound to a rock with an eagle devouring his liver each day, he became a symbol of sacrifice, rebellion, and the cost of empathy. Ancient Greeks admired Prometheus not only for his courage but for his unwavering belief in humanity's potential. Zeus's response to Prometheus' actions also revealed the complexities of divine rule. Though often portrayed as harsh in this myth, Zeus acted according to a cosmic order that demanded obedience. Fire represented divine knowledge, and granting it to mortals threatened the balance between worlds. Yet even Zeus was not immune to reconsideration. Over time, stories described his eventual decision to free Prometheus, either through the efforts of Heracles or by realizing that humanity's growth was inevitable. This shift reflected an important theme: even the gods learned, changed, and adapted. Meanwhile, Hermes bridged the gap between realms with effortless grace. As guide of souls, he brought the dead safely to Hades' kingdom. As messenger of the gods, he carried words that could change destinies. His presence appeared in countless myths where movement, transition, or cunning played a role. Hermes was the divine embodiment of adaptability, an essential trait in the rapidly evolving world of ancient Greece. Even within Olympus, relationships among the gods were constantly shifting. Some alliances strengthened over centuries of worship, others simmered with quiet tension. Hera continued to represent the principles of marriage and sovereignty. Yet her anger in myths often revealed deeper themes of loyalty, betrayal, and emotional consequence. Poseidon's unpredictable moods reflected the sea's dual nature, capable of nurturing life or swallowing entire fleets. Athena's presence brought reason to even the most turbulent conflicts, her guidance shaping heroes and cities alike. As stories traveled from region to region, variations emerged that highlighted the diversity of belief across the ancient world. In some areas, Demeter was the central goddess, her agricultural gifts seen as the foundation of civilization. In others, Dionysus held sway, his ecstatic rites offering emotional release and communal unity. And in yet others, local deities merged with Olympian ones, weaving together traditions that spanned centuries. This ever-changing landscape of belief showed that mythology was not static. It adapted, expanded, and reframed itself as the world changed. These fluid narratives ensured the gods remained relevant, their stories echoing through time like ancient melodies carried on the wind. Each myth, whether tragic, hopeful, or mysterious, offered insight into human nature and the forces that shaped existence. And as listeners drifted into sleep beneath starlit skies, they found comfort in these tale stories filled with power, wonder, and the timeless dance between fate and free will. As the tapestry of divine stories continued to grow, the influence of the gods began shaping not only physical landscapes but the very fabric of human culture. Across mountains, islands, and coastal cities, people developed rituals, festivals, and traditions that honored the Olympians and intertwined their myths with everyday life. These celebrations were more than religious acts; they were expressions of community identity, passing wisdom from one generation to the next while reinforcing the presence of the gods in every corner of existence. One of the most significant expressions of divine reverence was the festival dedicated to Zeus at Olympia. The ancient Olympic Games were not just athletic competitions. They were sacred events uniting Greek city-states in a rare moment of peace. Athletes competed not only for personal glory but for the honor of their cities and the blessing of Zeus. Victors were crowned with olive wreaths, symbolizing purity and endurance. For spectators, the games strengthened a sense of shared heritage, reminding them that despite political rivalries, they were part of a common cultural universe shaped by the gods. Apollo's influence spread through artistic and intellectual pursuits. Music, poetry, and oracular wisdom flourished under his guidance. The Pythian Games at Delphi honored not only athletic ability but artistic achievement, blending physical skill with creativity. These events celebrated the harmony Apollo represented, reinforcing the idea that beauty and strength were complementary rather than opposing qualities. Pilgrims seeking answers traveled across continents to hear the Pythia's words, accepting that even cryptic messages held insight into the mysteries of fate. Athena's influence extended into education, craftsmanship, and civic values. In Athens, festivals like the Panathenea honored her with grand processions, athletic contests, and competitions in poetry and music. Young citizens carried sacred offerings through the streets, demonstrating their devotion to the goddess who represented the ideals of their city. Through Athena, Athenians saw themselves as inheritors of wisdom, strategy, and innovation, a powerful cultural identity that shaped their contributions to philosophy, drama, architecture, and politics. Artemis, particularly revered in rural regions, inspired rituals centered on growth and protection. Young girls participated in ceremonies symbolizing their transition into adulthood, reflecting the goddess's role as guardian of innocence and transformation. The natural world, forests, rivers, mountains became extensions of Artemis's realm. Hunters prayed to her for safe passage and respectful harvests, believing that to anger her was to invoke the consequences of disrespecting the balance of nature. Dionysus festivals, on the other hand, tapped into the emotional and psychological depths of the human experience. His rites encouraged participants to release their inhibitions, explore hidden facets of their identities, and reconnect with primal instincts. Through music, dance, and communal celebration, people sought temporary freedom from social constraints. Though these rituals could be wild and unsettling to outsiders, they represented a recognition of human complexity. Dionysus embodied the idea that emotion, passion, and irrationality were natural parts of life, not weaknesses, but vital expressions of the soul. These diverse festivals illustrated how the gods offered different forms of connection. Some rituals were solemn and introspective, others vibrant and exhilarating. Through them, the Greeks created a spiritual landscape that honored the full range of human experience, from joy and desire to sorrow and contemplation. Temples, statues, and sacred spaces served as physical reminders of divine presence. Even travelers who passed through unfamiliar lands could find comfort in recognizing a familiar god's symbol etched into stone or carved into a sanctuary. Yet not all interactions between mortals and gods occurred through festivals. Many myths told of individuals who encountered the divine directly and experienced both awe-inspiring and dangerous. Mortals who approached gods without respect or humility often met tragic ends, while those who showed loyalty or courage found favor. These stories reinforced the belief that balance, reverence, and self-awareness were essential virtues. The tale of Niobe demonstrated this vividly. A proud queen blessed with many children, Niobe boasted of her superiority over Leto, the mother of Apollo and Artemis. Her arrogance invited catastrophe. The divine twins struck down her children, leaving Niobe frozen in grief, literally in some versions. She became a stone, eternally weeping, a monument to the danger of challenging divine order. Though tragic, the myth reminded listeners of the consequences of hubris, reinforcing the cultural value of humility before forces greater than oneself. In contrast, the myth of Baucis and Philemon reflected the rewards of kindness and hospitality. The elderly couple welcomed Zeus and Hermes without knowing their true identities, offering what little they had with genuine warmth. In gratitude, the gods transformed their humble home into a grand temple and granted the couple's wish to remain together forever. Their hospitality became a moral example, showing that the divine could appear in unexpected forms and that generosity held lasting power. As these stories circulated, the Greeks began to understand the gods not only as rulers but as reflections of universal truths. Struggles between deities could mirror social conflicts. Relationships among gods could represent emotional dynamics familiar to mortals. Love, jealousy, ambition, grief, triumph — these experiences were woven into divine narratives, allowing listeners to explore the complexities of life through myth. Despite the vast difference in power, the gods and mortals shared a common thread. Both were subject to fate. Even Zeus, the most powerful of the Olympians, could not overturn the decrees of the Moirai, the fates who measured the thread of every life. This idea shaped the Greek worldview profoundly. Fate was not punishment or reward, it was part of the cosmic structure, older than the gods themselves. Mortals found comfort in accepting that some events stood beyond their control, while the gods' struggles against fate reminded listeners that destiny touched every being, divine or human, through rituals, stories, and shared beliefs. The Greeks built a world where the divine and mortal existed in constant dialogue. Every mountain, star, and river seemed to whisper echoes of these ancient tales, reminding people that they lived not in isolation but within a universe shaped by wonder, fear, curiosity, and imagination. As Greek civilization grew more interconnected through trade, travel, and political alliances, the myths surrounding the gods continued to expand, taking on new shapes as they crossed boundaries of geography and culture. The stories adapted to the needs of the people telling them, creating a living body of mythology that evolved with every retelling. In this dynamic world, the gods did more than govern cosmic forces. They helped mortals explain mysteries, confront fears, and understand themselves. One of the most intriguing reflections of this evolving mythology appeared in the stories of metamorphosis, transformations where humans or gods changed form to escape danger, express emotion, or teach a lesson. These stories revealed the ancient Greek belief that the natural world was not separate from the divine but infused with divine presence. Trees, rivers, mountains, and constellations all carried memories of past events, each serving as a reminder that the world itself was a witness to the stories of gods and mortals. Among these tales, the myth of Daphne and Apollo stood out as one of the most haunting. Daphne, a nymph devoted to Artemis, cherished her independence and shunned romantic pursuits. When Apollo, struck by desire due to Eros' mischievous arrow, pursued her relentlessly, Daphne fled in desperation. As he closed in, she called upon her father, the river god Peneus, to save her. Her body transformed into a laurel tree just as Apollo reached her. Heartbroken yet reverent, he claimed the laurel as his sacred plant, weaving its leaves into crowns that symbolized victory and artistic achievement. This myth highlighted not only the intensity of divine emotion but also the theme that love, when unreciprocated or overwhelming, could lead to irrevocable change. Echo and Narcissus offered another powerful lesson. Echo, cursed to speak only the last words spoken to her, fell deeply in love with the beautiful but self-absorbed Narcissus. Unable to express her feelings, she faded into the wilderness until nothing remained of her but her voice. Narcissus, meanwhile, fell in love with his own reflection. Unable to tear himself away, he withered by the pool where he stared, and was transformed into the flower that bore his name. These intertwined fates illustrated the dangers of vanity, longing, and obsession, universal emotions explored through poetic transformation. The tale of Arachne expanded on this theme through the lens of artistry and pride. A gifted mortal weaver, Arachne claimed her skills surpassed even Athena's, provoking the goddess to challenge her to a contest. Arachne's tapestry stunned even the goddess, depicting scenes of divine wrongdoing with breathtaking precision. Though her artistry was undeniable, her audacity in exposing the flaws of the gods sealed her fate. Consumed by fury and humiliation, Athena transformed Arachne into a spider, dooming her to weave forever. The story became a moral reminder that excellence must be coupled with humility and that disrespecting divine order carried severe consequences. Yet other metamorphoses were acts of mercy rather than punishment. The story of Philemon and Baucis, transformed into intertwined trees at the moment of death, offered a gentle and hopeful vision of divine compassion. Likewise, the tale of Clytie, turned into a sunflower after pining for the sun god Helios, captured the bittersweet nature of love that endures even when unreturned. These myths allowed listeners to interpret natural phenomena as echoes of ancient, emotional world where every flower and every breeze carried memory. The constellations, too, served as celestial monuments to divine and mortal stories. The Greeks looked to the night sky not only for navigation but for meaning. Orion, the great hunter, became a constellation after dying at the sting of a scorpion, his story preserved above the horizon. Cassiopeia's vanity placed her among the stars in a throne that seemed to spin endlessly, a cosmic punishment for boasting that she surpassed the Nereids in beauty. Callisto, transformed into a bear and later into the constellation Ursa Major, offered a narrative of loss and redemption intertwined with Zeus's interference and Hera's wrath. In a world without electric light, the stars were an ever-present reminder that myth and environment were inseparable. As myths traveled, they interacted with the cultures of neighboring civilizations. Contact with Egypt, Persia, and the Near East introduced new symbols and religious ideas, subtly influencing Greek mythology. Some scholars argue that Aphrodite's oldest form resembles ancient goddesses like Inanna or Astarte. Others note parallels between Greek and Indo-European sky gods, lightning deities, and underworld rulers. These connections do not diminish the uniqueness of Greek mythology. Rather, they reveal the interconnectedness of ancient cultures and the shared human need to explain existence through story. Even the concept of fate reflected broader philosophical currents. The Moirai, the three fates, were among the oldest figures in Greek mythology, predating even the Olympian order. Clotho spun the thread of life, Lachesis measured it, and Atropos cut it. Not even Zeus could override their decisions. Their presence reminded mortals and gods alike that destiny operated beyond emotion, power, or negotiation. This idea shaped Greek tragedy, philosophy, and ethics, encouraging acceptance of life's unpredictability and the courage to face inevitable outcomes. Meanwhile, the gods themselves were not immune to longing, fear, or internal conflict. Their stories revealed vulnerabilities that made them strangely relatable. Apollo sought love, yet often lost it. Demeter's grief shaped the seasons. Artemis defended purity with ferocity born of trauma. Hera protected marriage but suffered betrayal. Even Zeus battled his own impulses, striving to impose order while wrestling with desires that threatened it. Through these complex portrayals, the Greeks explored the idea that power did not eliminate emotion or consequence. The gods were mirrors reflecting magnified versions of human nature. They acted on passion, pride, jealousy, and compassion. Their stories, though cosmic, carried messages grounded in daily life. Honor your commitments, respect the natural world, value wisdom, avoid arrogance, seek balance, accept fate with dignity. The more these myths expanded, the more they shaped Greek identity. They influenced law, art, theater, philosophy, and even political structure. They whispered through temple columns, echoed in poetry, and drifted through the night air during festivals. In every aspect of life, the presence of the gods could be felt not as distant rulers, but as companions guiding humanity through the mysteries of existence. As the centuries passed and the stories of the gods intertwined with human experience, Greek culture entered a period of intense philosophical reflection. The myths did not fade, they deepened, transformed, and inspired new interpretations. Poets, playwrights, and thinkers began examining the nature of divinity, the purpose of suffering, and the delicate line between human choice and cosmic law. Far from diminishing the gods, this introspection made them even more compelling, expanding their roles beyond mere folklore into symbols of universal truths. Tragedy, one of Greece's most enduring artistic contributions, became a stage on which the gods' influence played out. Writers like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides explored themes that resonated throughout the ancient world: justice, morality, pride, and the fragile balance between duty and desire. In these plays, the gods often served as forces that shaped human destiny, not through random cruelty but through lessons embedded in the fabric of existence. The audience recognized their own fears and hopes mirrored in characters struggling to navigate divine expectations. Consider the story of Oedipus, whose fate was sealed long before his birth. Despite his attempts to escape prophecy, every step he took led him closer to fulfilling it. The gods did not act to torment him. Instead, his tragedy reflected a philosophical idea deeply rooted in Greek thought that knowledge, no matter how painful, was essential for understanding oneself. The story served as a reminder that fate could not be outrun, but truth, once confronted, could lead to clarity and even redemption. Antigone, another tragic figure, embodied the conflict between divine law and human law. Her defiance of King Creon's decree in favor of honoring the gods' expectations illustrated the struggle between morality and authority. Through her courage, the Greeks explored themes of loyalty, justice, and the consequences of pride. The gods in this narrative acted as guardians of ethical truth, reinforcing the belief that, even in positions of power, mortals were accountable to higher principles. The tragedies also examine the emotional lives of the gods. In Euripides' Hippolytus, Aphrodite appears not as a distant figure but as a deity whose influence directly shapes the character's destinies. Her wounded pride leads to a cascade of misfortune, revealing how divine emotions could be as intense and consequential as human ones. Similarly, in the Bacchae, Dionysus emerges as a god who demands recognition, punishing those who deny him. The play portrayed the dangers of rejecting one's own inner complexity, using divine narrative to explore psychological truths still relevant today. Greek philosophy further shaped interpretations of the gods. Thinkers like Heraclitus, Pythagoras, and Plato approached myth with curiosity, seeking deeper meaning behind the stories. Heraclitus believed the gods symbolized universal forces: fire, change, harmony arising from conflict. Pythagoras saw divine order reflected in numbers, patterns, and music. Plato, though critical of the anthropomorphic portrayal of deities, acknowledged their symbolic significance. Through philosophy, the gods evolved into metaphors representing cosmic balance, intellectual pursuit, and moral reasoning. Yet even as philosophy offered new frameworks, traditional worship continued to thrive. Temples stood as architectural masterpieces, testaments to devotion and artistic brilliance. The Parthenon, dedicated to Athena, embodied the height of classical design, its marble columns catching sunlight that made the entire structure glow softly. Inside, statues of the goddess depicted her not only as warrior and strategist but as a guardian of knowledge. Her presence symbolized the belief that wisdom and strength were inseparable virtues. Similarly, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, showcased the reverence and grandeur devoted to the gods. This sanctuary, vast and elaborately decorated, stood as proof of Artemis's widespread influence beyond Greece. Pilgrims traveled long distances to offer prayers and gifts, seeking guidance for childbirth, protection, or safe journeys. The temples served as a link between communities, a space where divine presence felt tangible. Votive offerings, small gifts left at temples, reflected intimate connections between mortals and gods. Some offerings were simple clay figurines, woven garlands, small carvings, while others were elaborate works of art. Each item carried a story, a wish granted, a prayer whispered, a fear eased by the promise of divine attention. Through these offerings, the gods became companions in the daily lives of worshippers, embodying hope, gratitude, and aspiration. As the Greek world expanded through colonization and trade, myths spread to new territories, blending with local traditions. In southern Italy and Sicily, Greek settlers brought stories of Apollo, Athena, and Demeter, merging them with indigenous beliefs. Temples arose in foreign lands, establishing cultural continuity and connecting distant communities through shared devotion. Even as the myths adapted, the core essence of the gods remained intact, symbols of a world that humans could understand through narrative. Mysticism also played a significant role in shaping spiritual understanding. The Orphic tradition, attributed to the mythical musician Orpheus, offered a more introspective approach to the gods. The Orphics believed in the immortality of the soul, reincarnation, and purification through ritual. They revered Dionysus in a more philosophical form, seeing him not only as the god of ecstasy but as a symbol of life's cyclical nature. Orphic hymns, melodic and poetic, praised the gods in ways that emphasized their role in guiding the soul toward enlightenment. Despite these diverse interpretations, one thread remained constant. The gods represented the interplay between human experience and universal mysteries. They were not detached overseers but woven into the very structure of the world, present in storms, sunlight, harvests, emotions, and dreams. Through myth, philosophy, and ritual, the Greeks explored the profound question of what it meant to live within a universe filled with forces both visible and unseen. This deep engagement with mythology shaped a cultural legacy that transcended time. The gods, in all their complexity, became timeless symbols of humanity's search for meaning. Their stories lingered in every stone of ancient cities, every fragment of pottery, every whisper of the sea against Greek shores. And even as new civilizations rose and fell, the myths endured, carrying the wisdom, struggles, and beauty of an ancient people into the echoing corridors of history. As the influence of Greek mythology spread beyond the borders of the Mediterranean, its stories entered a new era of interpretation. Empires shifted, cultures mixed, and centuries passed, yet the gods remained vivid in the minds of poets, scholars, and travelers. The Romans, encountering Greek culture through trade and conquest, embraced these divine figures with remarkable enthusiasm. Rather than replacing them, they reinterpreted them, merging Greek deities with their own ancient gods. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera became Juno, Ares transformed into Mars, and so on. The stories themselves evolved, shaped by Roman values and political ideals. For the Romans, Jupiter embodied authority and justice on a scale that mirrored their empire's ambitions. Juno represented not only marriage but the protection of the Roman state itself. Mars, unlike the Greek Ares, was honored as a disciplined and noble god of war, reflecting Roman admiration for military order. These transformations highlighted how mythology could adapt to the identity of a new civilization, without losing its core essence. The gods became bridges between cultures, creating a shared spiritual landscape across vast regions. Even as Roman writers added their voices to the growing body of myth, the earlier Greek interpretations continued to shine. Philosophers such as Cicero examined Greek theology, seeking to reconcile divine narratives with rational thought. Artists carved statues that blended Greek idealism with Roman realism. Temples rose across Europe and North Africa, dedicated to gods whose origins lay in the mountains of Greece. The Olympians, once rooted in a specific region, became universal symbols of divine presence. As centuries advanced and Christianity began spreading through the Roman Empire, the status of the old gods gradually shifted. Temples were abandoned, rituals faded, and statues fell into disrepair. Yet, even as official worship diminished, the stories persisted. Rather than disappearing, the gods transformed once again, this time into literary, artistic, and symbolic figures. Christian scholars debated their nature, seeing them as poetic allegories, fallen spirits, or remnants of ancient cultural memory. Medieval writers interpreted them through moral or philosophical lenses, weaving their stories into broader teachings about virtue and vice. During the Renaissance, the gods experienced a powerful revival. Artists such as Botticelli, Michelangelo, and Titian brought them back to life with breathtaking detail, painting Aphrodite's birth atop sea foam, sculpting Apollo's serene beauty, and illustrating the fierce determination of Athena. Scholars rediscovered ancient manuscripts and began translating them, allowing new audiences to explore the myths that had shaped classical thought. This revival was not merely aesthetic. It represented a renewed fascination with humanism, beauty, and the profound ideas embedded in myth. Writers of the Renaissance and Enlightenment embraced the gods as metaphors for universal themes. Zeus symbolized the struggle for order. Hera represented the weight of duty. Prometheus became a symbol of rebellion and scientific curiosity. Dionysus embodied imagination, passion, and the pursuit of artistic inspiration. As mythology entered the realms of theater, poetry, and philosophy, it took on layers of meaning that extended far beyond ancient ritual. The romantics of the 18th and 19th centuries carried this momentum further. They saw the gods not as distant figures but as embodiments of the natural world, expressions of beauty, terror, longing, and awe. Poets like Shelley, Keats, and Byron wove Greek myths into their works, finding in them a language that captured the emotional depth of human experience. The gods became symbols of nature's grandeur and the soul's longing for transcendence. Persephone's descent echoed themes of sorrow and renewal. Orpheus's journey reflected the pain of love and the fragility of hope. Even as scientific discoveries reshaped humanity's understanding of the world, the myths retained their relevance. They offered something science could not: a poetic framework to explore emotions, fears, uncertainties, and ideals. While telescopes revealed the structure of the cosmos, the stories about Helios' chariot or Artemis's silver moonlight continued to enchant the imagination, reminding people that facts alone do not capture the full mystery of existence. Anthropologists later examined Greek mythology as windows into ancient psychology and culture. They saw the gods as representations of natural forces, social values, and human instincts. Athena symbolized rationality. Ares embodied aggression. Aphrodite represented attraction and desire. Poseidon stood for the unpredictable nature of the sea. In this view, mythology served as an early attempt to understand the world long before scientific method existed. Each god allowed people to personify emotions and events too complex to grasp otherwise. Carl Jung and later psychologists introduced the idea of archetypes, universal symbols found across cultures and throughout history. In this framework, the Olympian gods became figures representing aspects of the psyche. Zeus represented authority and judgment. Artemis embodied independence. Dionysus symbolized the unconscious and the need for emotional expression. These interpretations gave the myths renewed purpose, transforming them into tools for understanding human behavior. In modern times, Greek mythology permeates art, literature, film, and even everyday language. The planets carry the names of gods. Medical terms reference ancient figures. Literature courses explore Homer, Hesiod, and the tragedies. Fantasy novels draw upon their imagery. Filmmakers reimagine the myths for new audiences. Even video games feature Olympian storylines that introduce mythology to younger generations. This enduring presence speaks to something universal. The gods may no longer receive sacrifices at mountaintop altars, but they remain alive in the collective imagination. They appear whenever someone wonders about fate, seeks wisdom, longs for love, or faces the wildness within themselves. Myths offer a mirror in which humanity can observe its own complexity. They provide language for emotions that defy simple explanation, and they whisper reminders of a time when every star, river, and gust of wind carried the echoes of divine stories. Despite cultural change and technological advancement, the gods of ancient Greece continue to inspire awe. Their stories remain as vibrant today as they were thousands of years ago, whether encountered in books, museums, movies, or quiet nighttime reflections. These myths allow the modern world to stay connected to humanity's earliest attempts to understand life as greatest mysteries. As Greek mythology continued to evolve in the modern imagination, its stories found new life not only through art and literature but through archaeology. Over the past 2 centuries, countless discoveries have transformed scholarly understanding of the ancient world, revealing how rituals, beliefs, and daily life connected to the myths that shaped Greece's spiritual identity. Temples long buried beneath layers of earth resurfaced, inscriptions emerged from broken stones, and artifacts offered silent testimony to the reverence once shown to the gods. The excavation of Knossos on the island of Crete, for example, shed light on a civilization older than classical Greece. The Minoans, their intricate frescoes, vibrant colors, and symbols hinted at religious practices that may have influenced later Greek myths. The image of a powerful mother goddess, possibly linked to Demeter or Rhea, appeared in many forms. Bull imagery, so prominent in Cretan art, led scholars to connect the ancient labyrinth myth to rituals involving bulls and rites of passage. Although the Greeks later transformed these elements into tales of Theseus and the Minotaur, archaeology suggested deeper roots connected to fertility, kingship, and the cycles of life and death. Further north, the discovery of Mycenaean palaces revealed tablets written in Linear B, an early form of Greek. These tablets listed offerings to deities whose names closely resembled the Olympians. Zeus appeared as Daiwas, Hera as Hera, Poseidon as Poseidea. Such findings indicated that the gods were not inventions of classical poets but had existed in earlier forms for centuries. The continuity between Mycenaean religion and later Greek mythology became undeniable, reshaping the understanding of how these divine figures evolved. The gods, it seemed, were far older and more deeply rooted in the Greek consciousness than previously believed. Temples scattered across the mainland provided further insights. At Delphi, archaeologists uncovered layers of offerings from kings, merchants, and pilgrims. Gold, ivory, bronze, and inscribed tablets revealed the magnitude of devotion Apollo inspired. Statues of athletes, dedications from entire city-states, and intricate treasures demonstrated how the oracle served not only as a spiritual center but as a hub of political and cultural exchange. The site's architecture itself, built along a steep mountainside, seemed designed to evoke awe, guiding pilgrims upward toward the god's sanctuary as if ascending toward clarity. At Eleusis, the remains of the Telesterion, the Great Hall used for the mysteries of Demeter and Persephone, provided clues about the initiation rites that had remained secret for nearly 2 millennia. The massive hall could hold thousands of participants, indicating that the ceremonies were not limited to elites but open to a broad spectrum of society. The intensity of devotion surrounding the mysteries became clearer through inscriptions recording names of initiates, votive offerings left in the sanctuary, and artifacts that hinted at ritual symbolism. Even without fully understanding the rituals, archaeologists recognized that Eleusis was a place where the boundary between life and death felt thin, a sacred threshold where participants sought comfort in the promise of renewal. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, though largely destroyed, revealed architectural marvels that once made it one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Its enormous scale reflected Artemis's expansive influence across the Aegean. Statues recovered from the site depicted the goddess with symbols of fertility and protection, blending local Anatolian elements with traditional Greek imagery. This fusion highlighted the adaptability of Greek mythology as it absorbed and harmonized with regional beliefs. Artifacts discovered in everyday contexts also provided glimpses into how the gods influenced ordinary life. Simple household shrines found in homes across Greece illustrated that devotion was not limited to grand temples. Families kept small figurines of Athena, Zeus, or Apollo on shelves, offering prayers for protection, guidance, and harmony. Pottery illustrated scenes from myths, transforming mundane objects into storytelling canvases. Even coins bore the faces or symbols of gods, reinforcing their presence in commerce and daily interactions. The intersection of archaeology and myth also led to discussions about whether certain legendary locations truly existed. The ruins of Troy, uncovered by Heinrich Schliemann in the 19th century, sparked debates that continue today. While his methods were controversial, the evidence suggested multiple layers of cities built and destroyed over centuries, supporting the idea that a conflict remembered as the Trojan War may have roots in real events. Though the involvement of Olympus remained mythical, the reality of ancient conflict gave new depth to stories of Helen, Achilles, and Hector. Similarly, explorations of ancient shipwrecks revealed how Greek beliefs permeated maritime life. Divers uncovered votive offerings thrown into the sea figurines, small jars, coins left by sailors seeking Poseidon's favor for safe passage. These discoveries illustrated the deep fear and reverence ancient people held for the unpredictable ocean. For them, the sea was not just a route for travel but a living force governed by divine will. Even discoveries in burial sites contributed to the understanding of Greek beliefs about the afterlife. Tombs often contained items intended to help the deceased on their journey, coins for Charon, the ferryman of Hades, amulets for protection, pottery decorated with scenes of farewell and hope. These graves reinforced the view that death was not an ending but a transition governed by divine principles. The gods, especially Hades and Persephone, were not figures of dread but guides who ensured the soul reached its destined place. As archaeology illuminated the physical remnants of ancient worship, scholars began to recognize how mythology served as both spiritual guidance and cultural memory. The stories carried fragments of history, wars, migrations, rituals, natural disasters reframed through poetic imagination. The eruption of Hera, for instance, may have influenced myths of Atlantis or divine wrath. Earthquakes attributed to Poseidon could reflect real geological activity woven into narrative shape. Through these discoveries, the gods became even more fascinating. No longer confined to the pages of ancient texts, they became part of a broader historical tapestry. Their stories had physical footprints, temples, inscriptions, ruins, each offering clues about how ancient people perceived the divine. Mythology, archaeology, and history formed an intricate triad that allowed modern audiences to view the gods not only as symbols of imagination but as reflections of lived human experience. And as explorers, scholars, and storytellers continued to uncover these connections, the ancient world revealed itself as both distant and familiar realms shaped by wonder, devotion, curiosity, and the enduring presence of the gods who once walked its mountains, forests, and shores. As discoveries continued to shed new light on the ancient world, scholars and storytellers began revisiting the myths with fresh curiosity. They recognized that Greek mythology was not a static body of tales but a vast, living ecosystem shaped by centuries of interpretation. Each story carried layers: historical memory, symbolic meaning, poetic imagery, and spiritual truth. This complexity contributed to the enduring popularity of the gods, whose narratives resonated across different eras and cultures. One of the richest areas of exploration involved the subtle relationships among the Olympians themselves. Though often portrayed as a unified pantheon, the gods had personalities that clashed, complemented, and entangled in ways that mirrored human families only magnified to divine proportions. Their interactions revealed not only cosmic drama but profound emotional depth. To understand the Greek worldview, one had to look closely at these relationships, where affection, rivalry, loyalty, and ambition wove together into stories that shaped the ancient imagination. Take the bond between Athena and Zeus. Unlike many of Zeus's children, Athena was not merely beloved, she was trusted. Born from his head in a burst of brilliance, she embodied the intellectual clarity Zeus valued. While he often struggled to balance impulse and judgment, Athena provided the strategic perspective he sometimes lacked. Their dynamic represented an ideal of balanced leadership, one that combined strength with wisdom. In many myths, Athena advises Zeus or intervenes on his behalf, reinforcing her role as a stabilizing force in divine affairs. In contrast, the relationship between Zeus and Ares offered insight into tension between authority and aggression. Ares, though powerful, embodied uncontrolled violence. Zeus did not despise him, but he did not admire him either. Some myths describe Zeus expressing disappointment in Ares' destructive tendencies, yet Ares' presence served a purpose. He represented the darker sides of conflict, the fury and chaos that reason alone could not contain. Through their dynamic, the Greeks acknowledged that even within divine order, there existed forces that resisted structure and required constant vigilance. Then there was the intricate bond between Apollo and Dionysus too, gods often seen as opposites. Apollo represented clarity, logic, and harmony. Dionysus symbolized ecstasy, emotion, and the dissolution of boundaries. Yet their contrast was not antagonistic, it was complementary. Philosophers like Nietzsche later described them as dual forces shaping human creativity, the Apollonian structured and rational, and the Dionysian passionate and chaotic. The Greeks intuitively understood this balance, recognizing that life required both discipline and release. Their festivals honored each god in his season: Apollos during the ordered months, Dionysus during the winter months of revelry and transformation. The sibling rivalry between Artemis and Apollo also revealed layers of emotional truth. Though deeply loyal to each other, they occasionally clashed in stories where their values differed. Artemis, protector of innocence and the wild, sometimes opposed Apollo's more direct interventions, yet their unity remained strong, rooted in their shared origins and mutual respect. Their stories illustrated the dual nature of the natural world, serene yet dangerous, nurturing yet disciplined. Hera's relationships provided some of the most emotionally charged narratives, though often simplified as jealous or vindictive in modern retellings. Hera's actions reflected her role as guardian of marriage and social stability. When she confronted Zeus's infidelities, her responses embodied the pain of betrayal and the responsibility of maintaining cosmic order. Her clashes with Zeus were not mere quarrels, they symbolized the tension between duty and desire, authority and accountability. Hera also showed moments of compassion and wisdom, especially in myths involving her own children or those seeking protection under her domain. Demeter's quiet strength offered another essential dynamic within the pantheon. Her devotion to Persephone shaped not only the seasons but the emotional landscape of Greek spirituality. While Zeus embodied authority and Athena represented wisdom, Demeter captured the essence of unconditional love. Her sorrow in the face of loss and her resilience in the renewal of spring mirrored human experiences of grief and healing. Through her, the Greeks explored themes of motherhood, continuity, and the cycles that define existence. Poseidon's interactions with other gods often revealed his unpredictable nature. At times he stood as a loyal ally to Zeus, at others he challenged his authority. Their rivalry over patronage of cities, most famously the contest for Athens, highlighted the competitive spirit of the gods. Poseidon's gift of the saltwater spring clashed with Athena's olive tree, and the victory of Athena symbolized human preference for peace, cultivation, and prosperity over raw power. Despite the tension, Poseidon remained an essential figure, commanding respect for his dominion over the sea and the unpredictable forces of nature. Even Hades, often isolated from the others due to his realm, played a crucial role in maintaining cosmic balance. While he seldom clashed with his siblings, his presence reminded the gods that all things, including divine affairs, were subject to the boundaries of life and death. His relationship with Persephone softened his image, revealing a more nuanced character capable of affection, fairness, and restraint. Their bond represented equilibrium between the living world and the realm beyond. The younger gods added further complexity to the divine family. Hermes' mischievous charm created moments of levity amid cosmic tension. Aphrodite's influence sparked passion, conflict, and transformation, making her both an instigator and a healer. Hephaestus balanced creativity with vulnerability, showing that even divine craftsmanship carried emotional weight. These relationships shaped not only divine narratives but human understanding. Through them, mortals learned that conflict was natural, love could be complicated, and balance required constant effort. The gods were not models of perfection, they were mirrors of the multifaceted human soul. Their stories invited reflection, encouraging people to seek wisdom, face challenges, and understand the emotions that guided their choices. As the divine family's intricate tapestry expanded, the myths continued to evolve. Storytellers explored new perspectives, deepened familiar narratives, and wove subtle connections that enriched the ever-growing mythological world. And as mortals listened to these tales beneath starlit skies or within the marble halls of temples, they found comfort in the idea that the gods, in all their brilliance and imperfection, walked alongside them in the journey through life. As centuries continued to pass, the myths began reflecting not only the divine relationships among the gods but also the shifting needs and fears of the people who told them. The Greeks lived in a world filled with uncertainty. Storms could destroy crops, plagues could sweep through cities, wars could erupt unexpectedly, and life itself could change without warning. The stories evolved as a means of understanding these unpredictable forces, transforming cosmic mysteries into narratives that made the world feel more familiar, more human, and more forgiving. Natural disasters, for example, were often depicted as expressions of divine emotion. A thunderstorm was Zeus asserting authority or responding to injustice. An earthquake was Poseidon's trident striking deep into the earth, either out of anger or as a warning. A withered field might reflect Demeter's sorrow, while an unexpected wind carrying warmth or chill hinted at Hermes' mischievous presence. These mythological explanations created a sense of order in a world where control was limited, giving mortals the comfort of believing that forces beyond their understanding were guided by personalities rather than chaos. The sea in particular held a special place in Greek mythology. Surrounded by water on nearly all sides, the Greeks depended on the ocean for trade, travel, and sustenance, but they also feared it deeply. The sea could be calm and shimmering one moment, then violent and unforgiving the next. Sailors prayed to Poseidon not because they saw him as cruel, but because they recognized his power. They honored sea nymphs, left offerings at coastal shrines, and whispered prayers before embarking on voyages. The myths of Scylla and Charybdis, sirens luring sailors with enchanting voices, and the angry vengeance of sea gods represented real dangers faced by seafarers, transformed into symbols easier to understand. The land itself also became a living participant in myth. Mountains were homes of gods and refuges for heroes. Streams were governed by river spirits. Forests belonged to Artemis and her nymphs. Caverns served as entrances to the underworld or places of divine revelation. The Greeks did not separate nature from spirituality. The world around them was alive with meaning. Every grove, stone, and spring carried whispers of mythic history. This intimate relationship with nature shaped not only religious practices but the emotional tone of their stories, making them deeply connected to the landscape. The concept of hospitality, known as xenia, emerged as a central moral principle in many myths. Travelers often encountered gods disguised as mortals, sometimes seeking shelter, sometimes testing virtue. Those who offered kindness were blessed, and those who refused were punished. This idea reinforced social cohesion in a world where journeys were long, perilous, and unpredictable. Zeus himself was the protector of strangers, and tales like Philemon and Baucis reminded listeners that generosity was a sacred duty. The myths also examined the vulnerabilities of mortals, especially in the face of divine attention. Humans were capable of great bravery, yet they were fragile compared to the gods. Still, their actions carried significance. A mortal's kindness could move the gods. A mortal's pride could provoke disaster. Through story, the Greeks explored how ordinary individuals could impact cosmic balance. Heroes became embodiments of human potential, figures who could rise, fall, or transform through encounters with divine power. Another essential theme involved prophecy and the quest for knowledge. The Greeks believed that certain truths existed beyond human perception, accessible only through divine channels. Oracles at Delphi, Dodona, and other sacred sites served as intermediaries between mortals and the hidden will of the gods. People consulted these oracles not only for grand decisions but for everyday concerns. The act of seeking guidance acknowledged the limits of human understanding while honoring the wisdom of the divine. The ambiguity of prophetic messages, often delivered in riddles or poetic phrases, highlighted the belief that clarity required effort, humility, and reflection. Dreams were also considered sacred. The Greeks believed that dreams could carry messages from gods, ancestors, or the deeper layers of the soul. Shrines dedicated to Asclepius invited worshippers to sleep in sacred chambers where healing dreams might reveal cures. This connection between spirituality and the subconscious demonstrated a remarkable insight into the human psyche, suggesting that the boundary between divine revelation and personal revelation was fluid and intertwined. The passage of time itself became a character in mythology. Seasons shifted not only because of physical cycles but because gods experienced joy, sorrow, separation, or reunion. The Greeks saw time as a tapestry woven by the Moirai, influenced by gods yet rooted in ancient cosmic order. This view encouraged acceptance of change, joy, sorrow, gain, loss, as part of a larger pattern. Through myth, people found ways to navigate life's unpredictability with grace and resilience. As their world evolved, so too did the interpretation of myths. Philosophers questioned the literal truth of the stories, seeking allegorical meanings. Storytellers emphasized moral lessons, tailoring narratives for different audiences. Priests and ritual leaders used myths to explain religious practices. Artists sculpted and painted images that captured emotional or symbolic depth. Children learned values through simplified versions of the tales. Elders found comfort in the continuity the stories provided. Mythology became more than entertainment. It became a framework for exploring identity, morality, purpose, and the human soul. It gave people language for emotions they could not otherwise express. It connected generations through shared narrative. And it preserved the memory of a world where gods and mortals walked side by side, shaping existence through story, symbol, and imagination. Even now, the timeless resonance of these myths remains. They speak to modern listeners with the same quiet power, reminding us that beneath the complexities of modern life, the ancient questions endure. What guides us? What shapes our fate? What forces define our joys and sorrows? In seeking these answers, we continue the journey the Greeks began, listening to the stories of the gods, and finding ourselves reflected in every tale. As generations turned, the myths became the foundation upon which communities built their identity. But they also served as windows into the deeper psychological landscape of ancient Greece. The gods, with all their complexity, represented the full spectrum of human emotion: joy, longing, fear, ambition, and compassion. By giving these emotions divine form, the Greeks found language for feelings that were powerful yet difficult to express. The stories allowed listeners to externalize their struggles, projecting them onto divine figures who navigated conflicts larger than life. One area where this symbolic expression shone brightly was in the myths surrounding creativity. Hephaestus, god of the forge, represented determination and the transformative power of craft. His flames softened metal into shapes of stunning beauty, reflecting the belief that struggle could produce brilliance. The myths described him laboring tirelessly, his workshop filled with glowing embers and sparks that danced like stars. Every blow of his hammer symbolized the effort required to turn raw material, whether physical or emotional, into something meaningful. His imperfections made him relatable. His creations made him extraordinary. Muses, the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, served as the embodiment of inspiration. Each muse guided a different form of archetypic poetry, history, astronomy, dance, and music. Artists invoked their names before beginning new works, seeking guidance from the divine forces believed to shape creativity. Through the muses, the Greeks acknowledged that inspiration often felt like a gift, mysterious and unpredictable, arriving like a whisper from realms beyond conscious thought. Their myths captured the delicate balance between human skill and the inexplicable spark that ignited imagination. Similarly, the story of Orpheus blended music, love, and loss into a narrative that transcended time. Orpheus' songs were powerful enough to charm animals, melt stone, and even sway the heart of Hades when his beloved Eurydice died. He descended into the underworld to retrieve her, a journey no mortal had dared to attempt. His music softened the realm of shadows, convincing Hades to let Eurydice return on one condition: Orpheus must not look back until they reached the surface. Overwhelmed by doubt and longing, he broke the rule at the final moment, losing her forever. The story explored the fragility of hope, the torment of uncertainty, and the difficulty of trusting in forces beyond one's control, universal emotions that listeners across centuries could understand. Another profound aspect of Greek mythology involved the exploration of justice. The Greeks believed justice was not merely a human construct but a principle woven into the structure of the cosmos. Zeus, as guardian of law and order, upheld moral balance, but other gods also played roles in maintaining justice. The Uranus or Furies pursued those who broke sacred oaths or spilled familial blood, embodying the idea that profound wrongs demanded accountability. Their presence in myths reflected societal fears of guilt and retribution, emphasizing that certain transgressions carried consequences even beyond mortal courts. The myth of Orestes illustrated this theme vividly. After avenging his father Agamemnon by killing his mother Clytemnestra, Orestes was pursued relentlessly by the Furies. His crime placed him in a moral paradox, punished for fulfilling a duty that was itself rooted in vengeance. Eventually, Athena intervened, establishing the first court of law to judge his case. This myth symbolized the transition from personal vengeance to structured justice, reflecting shifts in Greek society as it moved toward legal systems governed by reason rather than bloodshed. Myths that explored ambition also resonated deeply. The tale of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun despite warnings, revealed the dangers of ignoring boundaries. His fall symbolized the consequences of overconfidence and the tragic beauty of dreams that reach beyond what is possible. Daedalus, his father, represented the ingenuity that could uplift or endanger humanity. Their story captured the bittersweet tension between innovation and humility. Similarly, Bellerophon's ascent toward Olympus on Pegasus reflected the seduction of arrogance. Once celebrated for heroic deeds, he attempted to join the gods, an act of hubris that led to his downfall. His punishment was not arbitrary. It was a reminder that immortality could not be earned through achievement alone. These stories encouraged listeners to pursue excellence while acknowledging human limits, a balance essential to Greek ethical thought. Myths also delved into the delicate structure of relationships. The story of Pygmalion, a sculptor who fell in love with a statue he created, examined themes of idealization and the desire for perfection. When Aphrodite brought the statue to life, it highlighted the power of love to animate dreams, but also reflected the cautionary message that obsession with idealized beauty could detach one from the complexities of real connection. The myth of Psyche and Eros explored trust, vulnerability, and the journey towards self-discovery. Psyche's trials, imposed by Aphrodite, demanded perseverance, intelligence, and emotional strength. Her journey revealed how love could be both transformative and demanding, pushing individuals to confront their fears and understand their true selves. Psyche's eventual union with Eros symbolized the harmony between soul and desire, offering a hopeful perspective on relationships rooted in growth and resilience. The relationships between gods and mortals also revealed intriguing dynamics. Some interactions resulted in blessings, heroes born from divine unions, cities protected by godly patrons, and innovations attributed to celestial guidance. But divine attention could also bring suffering, illustrating the unpredictability of life. Mortals who became the focus of divine desire often gained fame but lost peace, their stories becoming cautionary tales about the dangers of attracting the gaze of immortals. Yet despite the risks, mortals continued to worship, pray, and seek favor. They recognized that their lives were intertwined with forces beyond their control, but also believed they could influence their fate through devotion, wisdom, or courage. The gods were not distant, they were woven into the rhythm of daily existence. As myths evolved, they offered more than explanations for natural and emotional phenomena. They became tools for exploring the complexities of being human. Their characters faced dilemmas that listeners still encounter today: the pull between duty and freedom, the pain of loss, the temptation of power, and the search for meaning. Through storytelling, the Greeks created a rich spiritual and psychological map, one that continues to guide and inspire audiences long after temples fell silent and empires vanished. As the ancient world transitioned into new eras of thought, power, and cultural exchange, the myths surrounding the Greek gods continued to resonate deeply, shaping not only the emotional and spiritual life of Greece, but influencing countless civilizations that encountered them. Their stories transcended geography, becoming tools for understanding human nature, social order, and the forces of the universe. Even as political structures shifted and new religions emerged, the enduring echoes of the Olympians continued to whisper through history, reminding humanity of the timeless connection between story and meaning. One of the most profound transformations in how the myths were perceived came with the rise of philosophical schools that sought to reconcile divine narrative with rational inquiry. The Stoics, for instance, viewed the gods not as literal beings but as expressions of universal principles. Zeus became synonymous with logos, the rational order of the cosmos. Hera represented societal structure, Demeter symbolized the agricultural cycle, and Poseidon embodied the unpredictable depths of human emotion. This allegorical understanding allowed myths to remain culturally relevant while supporting philosophical exploration. Through this lens, Greek mythology became a guide to moral behavior and emotional wisdom. Epicureans, on the other hand, saw the gods as distant, serene beings untouched by human concerns. In their perspective, myths reflected humanity's tendency to project fears and hopes onto the cosmos. While they acknowledged the symbolic value of divine stories, they emphasized a universe governed not by emotion-driven gods but by natural laws. Yet even this viewpoint did not diminish the spiritual power of myths. It simply explored them through a different philosophical framework. As Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, the old gods underwent another transformation. Rather than being forgotten, they shifted from religious figures to cultural and literary symbols. Early Christian writers grappled with their significance, sometimes portraying them as metaphors, sometimes as spiritual beings displaced by a new order. The myths persisted in artistic expression, moral teachings, and academic study. Even as temples were abandoned, the ideas embodied by the gods remained woven into Western consciousness, influencing language, ethics, and imagination. Over time, the ruins of ancient temples became monuments of collective memory. Travelers marveled at the weathered columns of the Parthenon, the crumbling stones of Delphi, and the fading frescoes of Naissus. These remnants of ancient devotion carried a silent dignity, speaking of a world where people once believed the divine walked beside them. Philosophers, poets, and historians contemplated these ruins, drawing connections between the architectural grandeur of the past and the spiritual depth of the myths that shaped it. The gods lived on not in ritual, but in the awe inspired by these enduring structures. As the Enlightenment unfolded, scholars began approaching Greek mythology with renewed rigor. They sought historical origins behind the stories, examining how natural events, cultural exchanges, and psychological archetypes contributed to myth-making. They explored connections between Greek myths and those of ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and the Near East. Through this research, the universality of human storytelling emerged with clarity. Themes of creation, destruction, love, death, and rebirth appeared across civilizations, each culture expressing these ideas through its own divine figures. Yet despite these global parallels, Greek mythology remained distinctive. Its gods possessed a human-like vulnerability that made them relatable while still embodying forces vastly beyond mortal control. This unique combination of divine power fused with recognizable emotion ensured that Greek myths remained compelling long after their religious significance faded. In the modern world, the Olympians have become central figures in literature, psychology, cinema, and popular culture. Their stories are retold in countless forms, from novels to films, from museum exhibits to children's books. The gods appear not only as characters but as archetypes embedded in collective imagination. Athena inspires figures of wisdom and bravery. Hades shapes characters wrestling with darkness. Apollo influences depictions of reason and beauty. Artemis informs ideals of independence and natural purity. The continued popularity of these characters demonstrates that the core themes of Greek mythology remain relevant. People still search for meaning in chaos, struggle with emotional conflict, yearn for connection, and seek inspiration in creativity. The myths offer narratives that explore these timeless experiences with honesty and nuance. They remind audiences that strength and vulnerability coexist, that wisdom grows through challenge, and that even gods must face consequences. The enduring power of myth lies in its ability to evolve. In classrooms, students analyze the symbolism of Prometheus as a figure of intellectual rebellion, In counseling, individuals explore identity through Jungian archetypes rooted in Greek gods. In art, creators reinterpret ancient stories through modern perspectives, giving them new depth. These adaptations keep mythology alive, ensuring it continues to guide and inspire future generations. Modern retellings often reframe myths with greater emotional sensitivity, examining neglected voices or offering alternative interpretations. For example, Medusa's story is now explored through lenses of trauma and transformation rather than simple monstrosity. Persephone's descent is reinterpreted as a metaphor for empowerment and seasonal change. These reimaginings reflect contemporary concerns while honoring the timeless essence of the original tales. Through all these transformations, one constant remains: the gods still speak to us. They speak not through thunder, earthquakes, or omens, but through the stories that echo in our books, films, dreams, and conversations. They remind us of our shared humanity, our hopes and fears, and our desire to make sense of the vast universe around us. Their myths serve as bridges between past and present, linking ancient wisdom with modern introspection. As long as humans tell stories, the Greek gods will endure. They will walk among our imaginations, shaping new narratives while preserving old ones. They will continue to guide, challenge, and fascinate us. And in doing so, they will keep alive the spirit of a civilization that sought understanding not only through reason but through the profound and beautiful language of myth. As the modern world continued to advance, the mythology of ancient Greece remained a constant companion to human curiosity. Scholars, artists, psychologists, and casual readers alike found themselves returning to the stories, not simply for entertainment, but for insight. The myths held a mirror to humanity, reflecting universal emotions, fears, hopes, and internal struggles. Each god represented an aspect of the psyche, and each tale captured a moment of transformation, conflict, or revelation. In this way, the myths continued to guide people in making sense of a rapidly changing world. One of the most fascinating modern interpretations of Greek mythology came from the field of psychology. Carl Jung's work on archetypes deepened the understanding of how mythological figures embody universal patterns within the human mind. Athena became the symbol of strategic intelligence. Aphrodite represented desire and relational connection. Hermes embodied adaptability and communication. Hades represented introspection and the hidden depths of the unconscious. Through these archetypes, myths became tools for self-exploration, helping individuals understand internal conflicts and emotional patterns. They illuminated the ways people navigate ambition, love, fear, creativity, and loss. Even the rivalry between Apollo and Dionysus found new meaning in psychology and philosophy. Apollo, with his clarity and structure, represented the rational mind. Dionysus, with his ecstatic abandon, symbolized the emotional and instinctual self. These dual forces mirrored the opposing tendencies within human nature: reason versus feeling, order versus chaos, restraint versus expression. The Greeks did not see these forces as enemies but as complementary energies essential for a balanced life. Modern thinkers embraced this duality, recognizing that personal well-being required both introspection and celebration, discipline and spontaneity. Greek mythology also influenced conversations about ethics and leadership. Stories of Zeus's authority, Athena's diplomacy, and Hera's fierce loyalty offered frameworks for examining political responsibility and social order. Leaders studied the myths not to imitate the gods' actions but to understand the dilemmas they faced. Divine conflicts highlighted the importance of communication, foresight, and humility, lessons still valuable in contemporary society. The tale of Theseus navigating the labyrinth, guided only by Ariadne's thread, became a metaphor for making difficult decisions in complex systems. Perseus's journey, supported by divine gifts, symbolized the idea that success often requires collaboration and guidance. In literature, the gods found new forms. Authors reimagined familiar stories through different perspectives, exploring the motivations of characters who once appeared only briefly in ancient texts. Medusa's tale, for instance, became a lens through which writers discussed trauma, injustice, and resilience. Rather than a simple monster, she emerged as a figure burdened by divine cruelty and transformed by survival. Similarly, Circe became a complex protagonist in modern retellings: intelligent, lonely, compassionate, and powerful. These reinterpretations honored the original myths while highlighting contemporary themes such as empowerment, identity, and emotional healing. The gods also found a home in visual storytelling. In films, television series, video games, and graphic novels, they appeared as warriors, mentors, antagonists, or mysterious forces shaping the lives of heroes. Though these versions often took artistic liberties, the core essence of the gods remained recognizable. Zeus still embodied authority, Poseidon still commanded the sea, Athena still guided with wisdom, and Hades remained the misunderstood keeper of life's final boundary. Through these portrayals, new generations became familiar with ancient stories, connecting with myths in ways that felt vibrant and alive. Another profound area of influence was the environmental movement. As modern society grappled with ecological challenges, the reverence the Greeks held for nature embodied by gods like Gaia, Artemis, and Demeter resonated anew. Environmentalists drew inspiration from myths that emphasized respect for natural cycles, the sanctity of wilderness, and the consequences of disrupting ecological balance. Artemis's fierce protection of forests became symbolic of conservation efforts. Demeter's sorrow reflected the fragility of agricultural systems. Even Poseidon's storms echoed the unpredictability of oceans impacted by climate change. The growing fascination with ancient spirituality also revived interest in the rituals once practiced in honor of the gods. While no modern tradition perfectly replicates ancient worship, some groups draw inspiration from Hellenic rituals, seeking connection to the divine through symbolic offerings, meditation, and seasonal celebrations. These practices offer participants a sense of grounding and continuity, linking their lives to a lineage of ancient wisdom and cosmic wonder. Academically, the study of mythology continued to illuminate the ancient world. Archaeologists uncovered new artifacts, inscriptions, and ruins that pushed the boundaries of understanding. Linguists deciphered texts that had remained silent for centuries. Historians traced the spread of myths along trade routes, identifying cultural exchanges that shaped the development of Greek religion. Each discovery added nuance to the stories, revealing layers of meaning and connections previously unknown. Yet despite these scholarly advancements, the power of the myths lay not in factual accuracy but in emotional truth. People returned to these stories because they offered comfort, guidance, and the reassurance that their struggles were part of a larger human journey. The gods showed that even beings of immense power faced conflict, desire, uncertainty, and consequence. Their flaws made them relatable. Their triumphs made them aspirational. The myths encouraged listeners to accept their own imperfections and to find strength in resilience. Today, the stories of the Greek gods remain alive not because they are ancient, but because they are timeless. They speak to universal questions. What does it mean to be brave? How do we face loss? Where do we find purpose? How do we reconcile competing parts of ourselves? The gods offer symbolic answers to these questions, guiding people through emotional landscapes that modern language sometimes struggles to describe. In a world dominated by technology, science, and rapid change, the myths remind us that human experience has always been complex. They encourage slow reflection, imaginative wonder, and a sense of connection to something larger than ourselves. And as long as people seek meaning in stories, the gods will continue to walk beside them quietly, persistently, shaping dreams, inspiring art, and whispering wisdom across the centuries. As our journey through the stories of the ancient Greek gods reaches its final stretch, the echoes of their myths linger like the soft glow of a setting sun. These deities, once worshipped on mountaintops and in marble temples, now inhabit the world of memory, imagination, and quiet contemplation. They no longer command storms or shake the earth with their anger, yet their presence remains powerful, woven into the language we speak, the art we create, and the questions we continue to ask about ourselves. The myths endure because they offer something deeper than entertainment. They illuminate the timeless patterns of human existence. In their struggles, triumphs, and flaws, the gods reveal the honesty of ancient storytelling. Zeus, with his thunderbolts and contradictions, embodied the tension between authority and impulse. Athena, ever wise, reminded mortals that clarity of thought could illuminate even the darkest labyrinth. Demeter showed the depth of a mother's love and the resilience needed to endure loss. Artemis stood for independence, for the wildness within every heart. Apollo reflected harmony and the pursuit of truth. Hades taught dignity and solitude and the acceptance of life's final boundary. Each god captured a fragment of the human spirit, offering a divine mirror in which mortals could see clearer reflections of themselves. Their stories also revealed the fragile line between hubris and humility. Mortals who challenged the gods often met harsh fates, not to satisfy divine cruelty, but to reinforce the idea that wisdom requires respect for forces greater than oneself. Yet the myths also showed how courage could raise a hero from obscurity, how compassion could soften divine judgment, and how perseverance could transform tragedy into renewal. Each tale, whether tragic or triumphant, carried lessons whispered through the centuries: to seek balance, to honor truth, to embrace curiosity, and to remember the fleeting beauty of life. Even the landscape of Greece seemed shaped by the gods' presence. Mountains were thrones, rivers were gods themselves, forests housed divine spirits, and stars carried the memories of stories that reached beyond human lifespans. In this world, every breeze, every wave, every flicker of fire felt alive with meaning. The Greeks lived with a sense of wonder that infused everyday life with significance. Their myths taught that the sacred was not confined to grand temples, it was present in the world around them, waiting quietly to be acknowledged. As time moved forward and civilizations rose and fell, the role of the gods shifted. Worship faded, temples crumbled, and new belief systems emerged. But the stories remained, preserved in poetry, drama, sculpture, and whispered. Later thinkers found new interpretations within them. Artists gave them new faces. Writers explored their hidden meanings. Psychologists discovered archetypes beneath their divine masks. Across millennia, the gods adapted to the changing world, reflecting humanity's evolving understanding of itself. In the modern age, their myths serve as companions for reflection. They help us confront questions that resist simple answers. What is destiny? How do we face uncertainty? How do we reconcile conflicting desires? What does it mean to love, to create, to endure loss, to pursue purpose? The gods speak to these questions not with rigid answers but with stories symbolic, poetic, and rich with meaning. They remind us that life is not a straight path but a winding journey shaped by choices, challenges, relationships, and the mysterious interplay between intention and circumstance. And perhaps that is why their stories make such fitting companions for quiet nights. They carry a rhythm that soothes, a depth that inspires, and a sense of connection that transcends time. Listening to these ancient tales is like sitting beneath a sky full of constellations, each star holding a memory of something far older than ourselves. The myths invite us to drift into imagination, to travel to mountains where gods once walked, to seas commanded by divine hands, and to forests where moonlight carried whispers of sacred presence. Yet despite the grandeur of these stories, their final message is gentle. The gods live on not through lightning or prophecy, but through the hearts of those who remember them. Every time their stories are told, they breathe again, guiding, comforting, and inspiring anyone willing to listen. They remind us that even in a world shaped by reason and technology, there remains room for wonder. The ancient Greeks understood that myths were not simply tales of the past, they were invitations to reflect on the present, to explore the soul, and to imagine possibilities beyond the limits of everyday experience. So as this journey comes to an end, imagine the gods standing once more on Mount Olympus beneath a sky filled with shimmering stars. The air is calm, the world is quiet, and their presence feels distant yet familiar, like a memory you never lived but somehow still understand. Their stories continue to drift through the night, inviting anyone who listens to find peace, reflection, and a gentle sense of belonging. And perhaps as you close your eyes you can feel the soft echoes of those ancient voices, timeless, patient, and ever ready to guide you into dreams shaped by the wonders of a world where gods and mortals once walked together.